Hi, so I will be talking about various international parity conditions. So, the net game basically is that we have a few variables that we know about or have ways to find about, and there are some things that we want to know about. So, the variables that we know are inflation, the inflation rate, then we also know the interest rates. Okay. Now we'll play around with these two numbers to find either the future prices, forward prices, or spot prices in future. Now what's the difference? The only difference is that one is when I'm at S1, S0, S1 is if I'm trying to forecast S1, that would be spot price in the future. If I'm trying to forecast F1, that would be the price I would pay today for a future for this date. Okay, so these are the two things that we'll try to find out, and these are two things that we'll play around with based on different people who said different things, and a lot of basic algebra. We'll be playing around with these two things net. Okay, so we'll talk about four different components here, and in the end we'll bring them all together. So the four different components would be covered interest rate parity, uncovered interest rate parity, then Fisher, then purchasing price parity. Okay, these two talk about interest rate. Huh? This talks about inflation. This talks about both interest rate and inflation. Okay, so just like we said in the previous set that interest rate and inflation rate is what are going to be our plugins, and forward rates and expected spot rates in the future is what we're trying to find out. Now let's start with the covered interest rate parity. It's called covered because it's covered by the forces of arbitrage. Now the concept is very simple. So if there was no covered interest rate parity, people could have acted really smart, and what they could have done very easily was they would have taken a loan in one currency, get it converted into another, and just let it sit in a bank, and at the end of the year reap benefits. So because arbitrage cannot sustain long term in any business, you can't just sit around and earn money by buying one thing and selling in another market just because of the price difference. So banks said no, we get what you're trying to do, and basically forces of economics said no, we get what you're trying to do, so we are not going to let you do that. So let's take an example. Country 1, country 2. Let the currency of country 1 be C1, or let this one be C2. Let's say that our exchange rate is 5. Just to make like the calculations really simple. Let's say it's 5, and the interest rate here is 20%. Here is 10%. I'm exaggerating the numbers just to make the process look very so that the numbers are glaring enough for you to get the process. Now, interest rate parity. Yeah. So what happens is, let's say I borrow 1000 C1s. Okay, let's borrow 10,000 C1s. 10,000 C1s in the beginning of the year, and then I convert them. When I convert them, I have 2000 C2s. Okay. Now I let them sit for 1 year, and I have earned 20% on them. right? So now I have 2400 C2s. Okay. Now, what covered interest rate parity says is, so no wait, what I'm going to do is I'm going to convert it back, and I'm going to pay them this 10,000 plus the 10% interest. So I'm going to pay them 11,000 C1s. Alright. Now, what would be the rate at which I'll convert now? That was the rate at that point of time. What's going to be this rate? So that is the answer that covered interest rate parity gives me, which is that the interest rate is going to be S1. It's actually the future one, right? To 1 plus R of C1 plus R of C2 into days upon 360. We don't have to worry about this component because for simplicity we took one whole year. So what's going to be our answer? Our answer is going to be 1.1 upon 1.2. Okay. So it is going to be 4.583. Okay, the exchange rate. So when we convert this at this rate, you know what we're going to get? Exactly what we have to pay off to them is what we are going to get. So there's no arbitrage possible because of this. Your future rate is going to be this formula. So that's covered interest rate parity. Now moving on to the next one, which is uncovered interest rate parity. So what the curriculum says here is that there are some times when foreign currency contracts are not available or if the capital flows are restricted, then the relationship of covered interest rate parity would not work. So there is something else called uncovered interest rate parity, which is basically an estimation of what is going to be the spot price in the future. It's not the estimation of the future price down the line or the forward price down the line. It's just an estimation of what is going to be the spot price. So I'm here. What's going to be the spot price over here? This is what we're trying to find. We are not trying to find the price of the F1 forward. We're not going to do that. Okay. So yeah. So uncovered interest rate parity is called uncovered because it is not covered by the forces of arbitrage. It does not even hold true in short term. It holds true in very long term because there are frictions in the market. Markets are not as simple as this assumes it to be. So it's not really true in short term. So it has a very simple concept. It says that the change in exchange rate, either appreciation or depreciation, is going to be RA minus RB, where RA is the rate of interest of country 1 minus rate of interest of country 2 is what is going to be the change in exchange rate of country 1 minus 2. So let's say an example, that example where we had the country one's exchange rate was, okay, I think this was 10%, this was 20%, right? So what we have now is it's saying that it's going to be falling by 10%, and I think that is exactly what happened there, kind of what happened there. Yes, covered and uncovered are going to converge later. We'll talk about it in just a minute once we cover the international fisher relationship and purchasing power parity. Moving to the international fisher relationship. So, first domestic. Domestic says that the nominal rate of return is nothing but the real rate of return plus the inflation. Right? Now this they say is constant throughout the world. Whatever the difference is the inflation. Right? So it says that let's say there are two currencies. So nominal. So rate of return is basically your interest rate. Nominal interest rate in C1 minus nominal interest rate in C2 is equal to, if I take this inflation, if I take this equation, real would be cancelled by real. What would be left is the expected inflation in the first one minus the expected inflation in C2, right? So that is the basic relationship that has been built between the interest rate and inflation rate by Fisher relationship. Now we're going to be talking about purchasing price parity, which would be talking about how inflation rate affects the exchange rates. Okay, so if you notice, the chain that we are following right now is we've already found two ways to forecast or estimate what's going to be the forward price or spot price in the future using interest rates. Then we have jumped on to a relationship between interest and inflation. Now we're going to be finding out what is the relationship between inflation and the exchange rates. That is what we're trying, because as I told you, the end result is to estimate or find out the expected forward or future spot rates. Moving to purchasing price parity. So purchasing price parity, very simple concept. It says that again, let's take the example of country 1 and 2. So it says that if, let's say, a basket of goods is available, let's call the basket of goods to be two apples, two oranges, a bag of rice, and dozen eggs and a bread. Okay, so let's say it costs 50 rupees over here, and let's make this 10. Let's just stick to our previous number. 10 rupees over here, 50 over here. So we know that our exchange rate is this. Now what happens is there's inflation, 10% inflation through the year. This basket is now worth 11 rupees. 20% inflation through the year. This basket is now worth 60 rupees. So what this relationship tells me is that the increase in my price is basically going to be inflation of this minus inflation of this, right? No, I mean in C1, inflation of C1 minus inflation of C2. So that is going to be 10% appreciation. So this is going to become 5.5. Okay. Or let's find out from the formula where it says Yeah, very close. So change in the spot price is going to be your change in the interest rate. And the next slide we're going to be do the most fun thing, which is we'll combine all of these concepts into one big chart or a map, a kind of a mind map, which will give us some sense of what we just read. Yeah, so let's start with this information. Basically, I've kept all the numbers the same that we were using. C1 by C2, like the exchange rate is 5, then the interest rate is, this is interest rate, is 10% and 20%. Now let's use the uncovered interest rate parity. We know that it is going to be 1.1 upon 1.2. Okay, now let's talk about the, oh sorry, this is the covered. Let's talk about the uncovered interest rate parity, where we know the appreciation percentage is going to be 10 minus 20 is equal to minus 10%. So it's going to be falling by 10%. Okay, then let's talk about Fisher. So we are assuming a number here, let's say real rate of interest throughout is 4%, throughout the world is 4%. So inflation rate uh, in C1 is 6%, in C2 is 16%. As per purchasing price parity, the exchange rate is going to be depreciating by 10%. So it's going to be 5 into 0.9, and all of our answers here, just a second. Yes, all of our answers here converge, but what they're telling are very different things. This is the forward price, this is the spot price of the future. Okay, this one actually I'll have to check if it tells me. Yeah, even this is the estimation of spot price in the future. Okay, so this is where it all fits in, which basically makes sense, right? Because if it's basic algebra, I would say.